Hello everyone! Welcome to the first ever live stream of the all-new lecture on Specialized Plant Adaptations stems, the first of 3 in the lecture series on Specialized Plant Adaptations. My name is Brett. I am botanist and head grower here at Gabriella Plants. If this isn't your first live stream with us, welcome back. If this is your first time, I just want to go over a few things. First and foremost, this is a live presentation, and it's meant to be as interactive as you all would like it to be. So please feel free to drop in any questions you have in your chat, and then whenever I get a chance to get to them, I will be turning to my computer and answering your questions. So as we go through this presentation, please let me know at any point anything that's on your mind. As botanist and head grower here at Gabriella Plants, I have a very, very big background in plants. I have been into plants basically from the very beginning, from when I was 4 years old in pre-K. The story I like to tell is in pre-K, I kind of had that first interaction with plants by growing the one seed in a tiny Dixie cup. After that week lesson of learning the life cycle of the plant was up, I got to take that seed that sprouted, which happened to be a pumpkin seed, and take it home. I was living in a small apartment in New York at the time, and we didn't have a yard, but there was a hillside next to that apartment, and so thanks to my mom, we went ahead and planted that one pumpkin sprout that sprouted from that seed, and that fall we harvested 24 pumpkins that grew from that one pumpkin seed. And so to 4-year-old Brett, my mind was blown, and from then I was always hooked on plants, because plants are amazing. And that's what we're going to get into tonight with Specialized Plant Adaptations stems. As a little teaser, I'm going to say that Bret Michaels was wrong. Not every rose has its thorn. In fact, no roses has thorns, so stay tuned for that. The way I like to go about these lectures is kind of building on the material and building on the information so that we all have a better understanding as we get deeper into the material. So first, I just want to cover that plants have 3 vegetative organs: your leaves, your stems, and your roots. These function in photosynthesis, transportation, support, and storage. But plants have evolved specialized adaptations to make these functions interchangeable between these plant parts. In order to understand how these specialized plant adaptations manipulate each of the different plant organs, you have to understand the plant physiology and the plant anatomy of each of the plant organs. I'm not going to go into the specifics of this today. Maybe I'll save that for an Intro to Plant Physiology course. So let me know if that's something of interest to all of you. So there's a couple different key terms I'm going to be using throughout this presentation. First is adventitious organs. So basic understanding is plants have these 3 vegetative organs: your stems, your roots, and your leaves. And all plant tissues are composed of either of these 3 types of organs. So adventitious organs are new roots or buds that are formed from cells and tissues of previously developed shoots and roots. So what that means is if a bud is forming from a stem, that bud is adventitious because you have a stem that instead of that stem turning into more stem is now turning into bud or leaf. So when one organ becomes a different type of organ, that is an adventitious organ. The way that these adventitious organs are able to do that is through the term known as dedifferentiation. Dedifferentiation is the capability of previously developed differentiated cells to initiate cell division and form a new meristematic growing point, which then brings us to meristem tissue. Meristem tissue is tissue composed of undifferentiated cells that can produce new cells by division. So, meristematic tissue dedifferentiates, and then through that dedifferentiation, you are able to form adventitious organs. See how all 3 of those terms fit into each other. So, with that, let's get into specialized plant adaptations stems. The overall appearance of specialized stems may differ markedly from that of the stems discussed so far of a typical stem, but all stems have nodes, internodes, and axillary buds. These features distinguish them from roots and leaves which do not have them. The leaves at the nodes of these specialized stems often are small and scale-like. Also to note, The area or region of a stem where a leaf or leaves are attached is called a node, and the stem region between those nodes is called an internode. Each angle between a petiole and the stem contains a bud. The angle itself is called an axil, and the bud located in the axil is an axillary bud. Now that we understand the 3 different plant organs and the one specific plant organ that we're going to be discussing today, stems, let's go into the different types of specialized plant stems. Also, I want to pause and mention thank you, Lost in the Garden of Life. Love Brett, he knows his thank you very much. I like to believe that I do. So with that, let's get into it. First, we're going to be covering rhizomes. Rhizomes are horizontal stems that grow below the ground, often near the surface of the soil. They superficially resemble roots, but close examination will reveal scale-like leaves and axillary buds at each node, with short or long internodes in between. So, the example rhizome that I have for all of you here is this ginger. Usually, when you go to the grocery store and you buy ginger, you buy it as what is called a ginger root. But in fact, it is not a root at all. It is a specialized plant stem, and it is actually a rhizome. Adventitious roots are produced all along the rhizome, mainly on the lower surface. A rhizome may be relatively thick, fleshy food storage organ, such as in this ginger, or it may be quite slender, as in many perennial grasses or some ferns. So, rhizome, specialized plant stem, is a stem, and so this right here, ginger, is a ginger rhizome. It is not a ginger root. Next, let's go over runners versus stolons. Okay, so runners are horizontal stems that differ from rhizomes in that they grow above the ground, generally along the surface. They also have long internodes. So an example runner that many of you may know is strawberry plants. Strawberry plants produce one main plant and then put out these runners that are really long with really long internodes and then produce plantlets at the tips of those runners. So in the houseplant industry, you may know a runner probably the most is going to be a spider plant, chlorophytum. Chlorophytum produce these long, long runners, and then at the tips of the runners, they will produce these new plantlets. So these plantlets here are adventitious buds which appear at interval nodes along the runner and develop into new plants. Stolons are similar to runners but are produced beneath the surface of the ground and tend to grow in different directions but not usually horizontally. So, as another example, Irish potato tubers, or white potato tubers, are produced at the tips of stolons. The difference between runners and stolons is up for debate. Some botanists consider stolons and runners to be variations of each other and prefer not to make a distinction between them. So you could say that Irish potatoes are produced from runners, but generally speaking, the difference is whether or not they are above the ground or below the ground, and whether they're growing horizontal or in a different direction. That then leads into tubers. So, did you all know that this Irish potato, this white potato here, is not a root? It is actually a specialized plant adaptation stem known as a tuber. Tubers have several internodes at the tip of stolons that swell from the accumulation of food and become these tubers. The mature tuber becomes isolated after the stolon to which it was attached dies. The eyes of the potato are actually nodes formed in a spiral around the thickened stem. So, as you can see, each of these eyes here is actually an adventitious bud waiting to grow from this specialized plant stem. How cool is that? Each eye consists of this axillary bud in the axil of a scale-like leaf, although the leaf is visible only in very young tubers. The small ridges seen on mature tubers are leaf scars. So there are buds here, and then basically the ridges that you see are leaf scars. So that's pretty cool. an Irish potato is not a root. It's actually a tuber. Next, let's go over bulbs. Bulbs are actually large buds surrounded by numerous fleshy leaves with a small stem at the lower end. So as you can see from the diagram here, in a bulb, which the example I have for all of you is this onion, the stem is actually only this very small bottom part right at the base. And the rest of the bulb and the rest of the onion that you see actually is comprised of these really, really fleshy leaves. Adventitious roots grow from the bottom of the stem, but the fleshy leaves comprise the bulk of the bulb tissue, which stores food. In onions, the fleshy leaves usually are surrounded by scale-like leaf bases of long grain above-ground leaves. Other plants producing bulbs include lilies, hyacinths, and tulips. So on this bulb, the stem is actually only this very bottom part here, and the rest are leaves. And then the roots come from the base. So just in a bulb, tiny bit of stem, lots of leaves, which is different from, next, corms, with the example corm being garlic. Corms resemble bulbs but differ from them in being composed almost entirely of stem tissue, except for a few papery scale-like leaves sparsely covering the outside. So unlike the bulb, which only the tiny bottom part was stem and the rest are leaves, almost all of this inside part of this garlic here, of this garlic corm, is stem, with the leaves just being these papery parts on the outside. So the majority of the garlic clove and the garlic corm itself is all stem, as you can see in the diagram next to me. And then leaves being the outside papery parts, and then the roots growing from the bottom. These adventitious roots are produced at the base, and corms, like bulbs, store food. Crocus and gladiolus are another great example of corms, as well as in the houseplant industry, alocasias grow from corms. So hopefully that made sense, the difference between a bulb and a corm. Bulbs are mostly leaves, corms are mostly stems. Next, we're going to go over phylloclades or cladophylls. These two terms are actually interchangeable, and they mean and regard the same specialized stem adaptation. Cladophyll and phylloclades are actually the same two Latin epithets, just switched. So cladophyll, phylloclade, call it whatever you like, they're the same thing. But a phylloclade or cladophyll are these flattened stems with scale-like axillary buds, with the leaves being reduced to spines. So example phylloclades or cladophylls are going to be plants like many epiphytic jungle cacti, like Epiphyllum or Ripsalis, and even succulents such as Euphorbia. These plants have these really wide-looking leaves, but in fact, they are not leaves, they are modified stems. That's really, really cool. So at each of those nodes along the phylloclade, leaves, which could be reduced to spines, form. That's really, really cool. I love that. Pause for hydration. Next, we're going to go over the difference between thorns, spines, and prickles. Okay, so thorns are modified stems. There is a difference between these three, okay? Thorns, which are modified stems, are subtended by a leaf. That means that the leaf is under the thorn. Thorns may be branched or unbranched. So an example plant as seen here that has thorns is this Aloadia. Aloadia have thorns, not spines. Thorns grow directly from stem tissue. So stems are thorns, thorns are stems. Thorns are modified stems. Compared to spines. Spines are not stems. Spines are actually modified leaves or stipules, or a fusion of the stem and lower portion of a leaf petiole. So, Plants that have spines are going to be euphorbias or pachypodiums, or which are Madagascar palms, or cacti. They all have spines, not thorns. Again, spines are modified leaves or stipules, not stems. Cacti spines are modified leaves located at the axil of a leaf. A group of spines is termed an aerial, and aerials are modified stems while the spines grow out as vestigial leaves. So like on a cacti, the part where all of those spines come out is the aerial. That aerial itself is modified stem, but the spines that grow out of it are modified leaves, not stems, whereas thorns are modified stems. Compared to, okay, prickles. Prickles are neither stem nor leaf specialized plant adaptation. Prickles are an outgrowth from the epidermis or bark. So, roses don't have spines, roses don't have thorns, roses actually have prickles, but every rose has its prickle. Probably didn't sound as great lyrically, so even though he's botanically wrong, I guess I'll give Bret Michaels a pass. Prickles, being the outgrowth of epidermis or bark, essentially, they're also called emergences. These occur in other places than the stem node, like thorns or spines. So, thorns or spines are going to be right along a bud. They're going to be right along an axil, right along a node on a plant where the stem or leaf would be modified and grow out of. If you have a thorn or spine looking thing that is growing from a part of the plant that isn't a node, then you have a prickle. So it's essentially just an outgrowth from the epidermis layer. Prickles can occur on leaves and may protrude from the main veins of the leaves. They may also form on the edges of a leaf or on bracts or on fruit. Most notably like datura fruit are really, really spiky. Pandanus leaves can have spiky edges. Even though they're spiky, they are not spines, they are actually prickles. So, now you know. As you can see here, this example, this is a ceiba or silk floss tree, and so these are prickles. They are not thorns and they are not spines, they are prickles. So, now you know the difference. All right, so hopefully the difference between those three made sense, and I'm going to go ahead and move on to even more specialized plant stem adaptations. Next are going to be bulbils or bulbils. Again, that term is used interchangeably. Bulbils, aka bulbils, are pups of a plant. These are vegetatively reproduced plantlets from axillary buds on the parent plant stem or in place of a flower on an inflorescence. What you're seeing here to the side of me is a mangave bulbit. So what has happened is this mangave flowered, and on the inflorescence it produced a bunch of flowers, but in some places, instead of a flower forming, a bulbil formed, and so instead of that flower, which would have been sexually reproduced, a vegetatively reproduced pup happened instead. And so as these pups and these bulbils grow, they actually form fully formed plantlets of the main original mother plant. But they aren't sexual clones of the main plant, they are vegetatively reproduced clones. This phenomenon where the inflorescence actually produces vegetatively reproduced plantlets is known as pseudoviviparity. Which is different from regular vivipary, which is where a sexually reproduced seed starts forming and starts growing while still attached to the mother plant. So really, really cool when this happens. But so basically, any time that you have a vegetatively reproduced plantlet, it is technically known as a bulbit or a bulbil. So just a couple left. We're really going through them. Please let me know if you have any questions. But so next up are ramblers. Ramblers are stems that are adapted in a manner for a specific type of growth where they simply rest on top of other plants. So what you're seeing here is a Strophanthus prusii resting on top of a coca loba leaf. This type of rambler growth is different from other stems that form specialized plant adaptations known as tendrils. So ramblers don't have any ability to grab onto a host plant. They simply grow long and rely on resting on other plants as their method of growth. So, comparing a rambler to that of a tendril. Tendrils, in some plants like grapes and Boston ivy, in Boston ivy, the tendrils actually have adhesive discs. But in many tendrils, essentially they are just specialized stems that form these coils. What is actually happening physiologically with a tendril is a tendril grows straight at first. But once it hits something and feels contact, the cells on that side of the tendril begin to sharply coil. And so as long as the pressure on that tendril remains positive and there is something physical still there, it will continue to spiral and spiral and spiral, which allows it to grab onto something. If you hit a tendril with something and it starts to curl, but then you remove that physical thing that the tendril is curling around, that tendril will actually straighten back out, which is really, really cool. It knows. How it knows, we won't get into, but the plant knows whether or not the structure that it is hitting is there and is there indefinitely as a physical support. And so that tendril will curl and curl around, which then allows that plant to actually grab onto the host, and from there can climb and travel throughout the canopy wherever that plant needs to grow. So ramblers don't have any ability to hold on to anything, whereas tendrils do possess that ability to actually hold on to something. There are some plants where tendrils are modified leaves or leaf parts, like in peas or cucumbers, but the example that you see here is a passiflora, and so this is a stem tendril. So with that is all of the examples I have for specialized plant adaptation stems. I'm going to go ahead and answer some of these questions. I hope you learned a lot from this. I hope you now go through and every time you hear that song, you correct the radio and you say, no, it's actually a prickle, Brett Michaels. And I hope you can bring out at your next dinner party the difference between a bulb and a corm. I love sharing this botanical knowledge and I love inspiring all of you to continue to learn. Plants are amazing. Let's see. Lost in the Garden of Life asks, do bulbils always produce an exact copy of the mother plant, or are there mutations? Technically, yes, they are always exact copies of the mother plant because they are vegetatively reproduced. They're not sexually reproduced. If they were sexually reproduced, then there would be more of an ability for there to be mutations, but when you vegetatively reproduce, hypothetically, it is an exact copy. Mutations can always happen. Anytime a cell divides, there is always that potential for the DNA to get mutated and mess up and there be a difference. But generally speaking, yes, bulbils are an exact copy of the mother plant because they are vegetatively reproduced. Chris says, you're such a prickle in my side, doesn't have the same ring to it. Glad that never caught on. You are correct. It doesn't have the same ring, but, you know, technically, it would be a prickle in your side. Please let me know if there's any last-minute questions. But with that, I have really enjoyed my time with all of you here, and please stay tuned in the upcoming weeks because we just went over all of the specialized plant adaptations for stems, but there are specialized plant adaptations for roots and for leaves that I will be covering in future lectures. So stay tuned for those dates that we will have in the upcoming weeks for those next lectures. Thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Brett, and thank you for tuning in. From everyone here at Gabriella Plants, have a good night.